Polish police kill a solidarity demonstrator in violent street battles in Krakow. But the union vows its voice will not be stilled. This is O28 News. Good evening. Australia's Foreign Minister begins efforts to get Moscow back to the arms negotiating table, but the prospects remain dim. Details soon on O28 News. Good evening.
American hostages still held in Lebanon as on-again, off-again released plans delay their trip to freedom. This is SBS World News. Good evening and welcome to our new viewers in Brisbane, Adelaide, the Gold Coast, Newcastle and Wollongong, joining for the first time our network audience in Melbourne, Sydney and Canberra. 24 hours after their supposed departure for Damascus, 39 passengers and crew from TWA Flight 847 are still in Beirut.
A bloody end to a demonstration by peasant farmers in Manila. This is SBS World News. Good evening. Police and troops in Manila are tonight on full alert after a demonstration outside the presidential palace ended in bloodshed with soldiers firing into the crowd.
Anger over Victoria's building society crisis. And a homecoming turns violent in South Africa. This is SBS World News. Good evening. The Soviet Union has lifted its crippling economic blockade of Lithuania 24 hours after the rebel republic agreed to freeze its declaration of independence.
Growing world pressure for an end to the war that turns children into soldiers. The death of a giant of German politics. And the rising damages bill in South Australia's flooding.
Effort to complete key bridge for Bosnian NATO mission. Italian Prime Minister set to resign, and Yeltsin adamant on reform despite election woes.
Disaster in China, 1,000 people dead in huge Yangtze River flood. The big tick, Cambodian elections considered a success. Rebuilding shattered lives in Papua New Guinea. A 9-day wonder, Austrian miner rescued from underground tomb. Good evening, I'm Indira Naidu. First tonight to the flooding in China, which has now claimed at least 1,000 lives. There's no end in sight to the rainfall, which has submerged towns and cities near the mighty Yangtze River. Millions of people are working round the clock to try to reinforce the river's crumbling banks. More Kosovan men appear with new tales of terror. 9 bodies found, police look for more. Snowtown killings become Australia's worst ever serial murder. And unknowns and newcomers triumph at Cannes. Good evening, I'm Indira Naidu. We begin tonight in the Balkans, where NATO's air campaign is entering its third month. Allied commanders say the daily bombing runs are grinding down the Yugoslav people and the Belgrade leadership. But with no end in sight, patience is running out on both sides. The prospect of a ground invasion is on the agenda again tonight as the Allies try to bring the conflict to a conclusion. Good evening, Indira and I do with an SBS News update. The United States is putting pressure on Indonesia to speed up the repatriation of East Timorese refugees. Good evening, I'm Indira Naidu. Coming up in the World News at 9, Clinton in China. Beijing's top students challenge the American president.
Taking flight, Argentina's president flees the palace as crowds bay for his blood outside. British troops arrive in Afghanistan ahead of tomorrow's swearing-in of the new government. The Commonwealth takes a step towards expelling Zimbabwe. The Prime Minister comes to the defence of the Governor-General. And Moscow gives the Salvation Army their marching orders. Good evening, Anton Enos with SBS World News Tonight. Senators in Argentina have filed treason and manslaughter charges against former President Fernando de la Rúa, who was forced to step down today following massive street protests. Pleading for his life as dozens lose theirs, multiple bomb attacks complicate efforts to free the British hostage in Iraq. The Kyoto Protocol set to become a reality following Russia's decision to sign up. Stifling debate, the torturous rules governing the Bush-Kerry showdown, and debt and disease, progress of sorts on Africa's twin scourges. Good evening, Anton Enos with SBS World News Tonight. Almost 40 children have been killed tonight in 3 near-simultaneous car bombings in western Baghdad. 3 men and a woman were also killed in the explosions.
Howard under fire as Labour demands answers on the children overboard saga. I'll prove you wrong. Slobodan Milosevic opens his defence against war crimes charges. Arafat's admission. The Palestinian leader accepts responsibility for arms smuggling. And soccer, the latest victim of Argentina's economic crisis. Good evening, Lee Lin Chin with SBS World News Tonight. The Prime Minister has declared tonight that he did not lie to the Australian public when he backed claims that both people had thrown their children into the ocean. Mr. Howard told Parliament that no one had told him the claims were wrong.
A former Australian military leader rejects involvement in America's missile defence program. Another Apache down in Iraq, but the US says there are signs it's getting on top. Queensland's polled to be Mark Latham's first electoral test as opposition leader, and chickens hatch a new health scare in Asia. Good evening, Mary Kostakidis with SBS World News. One of Australia's most decorated military leaders has rejected the Howard government's possible involvement in Washington's missile defence program known as Son of Star Wars.
SBS World News tonight. APEC over, John Howard sets his sights on a free trade. Fraught visit. Australian bomb victim puts the Prime Minister on the spot in London. Not welcome. Britain draws up plans to deport alleged extremists. Don't panic. The message from Australia's medical chief as bird flu spreads to Indonesia. And saying sorry. Steve Vizard appears in court. Good evening, Anton Enos with World News Australia. To those stories in a moment, but first to some breaking news in Indonesia.
A new team for a new year. The Prime Minister reshuffles his cabinet. Demanding the death penalty, prosecutors want the Bali 9 ringleader to face the firing squad. Conceding defeat, Conservatives sweep Canada's Prime Minister from office. And off the menu, Sydney Harbour's fish unfit to eat. Good evening, Mary Kostakidis with SBS World News Australia. John Howard has made sweeping changes to the government's front bench, with the Nationals losing a minister in the reshuffle. Iraqi police celebrate the death of Al-Qaeda leader Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. But will it have any effect on Iraq's spiral of violence? Mixed signals from Iran on the future of its nuclear program. And all in readiness for the start of the World Cup finals, now just hours away. Welcome to SBS World News Australia. I'm Amrita Chima. More than 30 people have been killed in Baghdad in the 24 hours following the death of Al-Qaeda leader Abu Musab al-Zarqawi.
The federal government changes tack on carbon emissions trading.
American and Iraqi forces set for the mother of all battles in Baghdad.
And the fact that the day after we had spent 4 days with him, charges are presented to him in our absence. An act of bastardry on any scale.
An angry lawyer for David Hicks arrives back from Guantanamo Bay.
And a question for the Qantas consortium: will it still call Australia home? Good evening and welcome to SBS World News Australia. I'm Mary Kostakidis.
And I'm Stan Grant. Also tonight,
I shift from second into fifth gear and the fuel consumption drops significantly.
how changing your driving habits can cut emissions and save money.
And in sport, a new coach appointed for the Australian cricket team. But first tonight, the federal government has been persuaded to consider a national trading scheme on carbon emissions as part of its response to climate change. The opposition says it's about time. But the Prime Minister says he won't be endorsing anything that hurts Australian industry, including a carbon tax. More flooding flooding and further evacuations forecast for Gippsland residents.
We're not taking anything from anybody, we're trying to give things back.
The PM dismisses claims of an Aboriginal land grab. Alexander Downer assures Iraq Aussie troops are in for the long haul. And the 12-year-old thrilling crowds at the US Women's Open. Hello and welcome to SBS World News Australia. I'm Amrita Chima. Residents of Victoria's Gippsland are preparing for more flooding in the coastal lakes area tonight. Floodwaters have been met by a king tide at lake's entrance.
Coming up in SBS World News Australia at 9:30, Prime Minister Kevin Rudd flies into Bali amid a climate change storm.
Hundreds missing at sea as a fierce typhoon lashes the Philippines. Mass arrests in Nepal as riot police clash with exiles from Tibet. 12 die in Mexico City as a police raid on underage drinkers goes horribly wrong.
And the Socceroos set out to climb the Great Wall of China.
Good evening and welcome to SBS World News Australia. I'm Lee Lin Chin.
And I'm Craig Foster.
Also tonight, the death of cricketer's wife Jane McGrath after a long fight against breast cancer.
And Russia reaches the Euro 2008 semi-finals as super coach Horst Hiddink weaves his magic yet again.
But first, to a tragedy unfolding tonight off the central Philippines. Hundreds of people are feared drowned aboard a large inter-island ferry which has foundered in seas being lashed by Typhoon Fengshen. Two Australians among more than 60 people killed in a Cuban air crash.
There was some engine trouble and deja vu.
Qantas defends safety record as passengers experience another mid-air emergency over Singapore. Militants kill scores in Pakistan mosque bombings and the Taliban talks.
And Australia wins gold at the World Rowing Championships in New Zealand.
Good evening and welcome to SBS World News Australia. I'm Lee Lin Chin.
And I'm Michael Tomalaris.
Two Australian women are among the 68 people killed in a plane crash in Cuba. Australian Foreign Affairs officials have just confirmed they are a 49-year-old woman from New South Wales and a 47-year-old woman from Queensland.
Flood levies hold, but Queensland towns are not out of the danger zone yet.
I am very confident that we will hold the water out of the majority of the town that's inside that levee bank.
Preferred Prime Minister Julia Gillard overtakes Tony Abbott in the polls but still lags behind Kevin Rudd.
If we do that hard work, I believe we can win the election when it's held in 2013.
Dozens killed in Syrian shelling amid anger over UN veto.
From SBS, this is World News Australia.
Good evening and welcome to SBS World News Australia. I'm Anton Enos.
And I'm Janice Peterson.
Also tonight, the growing menace of politically motivated internet hacking. We examine a unique medical defence in high-profile hacking cases.
And we have highlights as Madonna wows the crowd at the world's most watched halftime show, the Super Bowl.
Authorities believe the Queensland town of St George will be spared a catastrophic flood. The floods are not expected to peak as high as first thought, and so far the levees are holding.
But the threat to other towns in Queensland and in northern New South Wales remains. SBS reporter Lauren Pedersen has been watching developments.
The polls suggest here's the Prime Minister in waiting. Tonight we are live with Tony Abbott.
Dumped once by his colleagues, does Kevin Rudd face the same fate from voters?
And what I'd say to each and every one of you, I wouldn't sort of start rushing to conclusions. This is a pretty interesting election.
And tensions in St Petersburg. Russia and the US remain divided over a Syrian missile strike.
From SBS, this is World News Australia.
Good evening and welcome to the program. I'm Sarah Arbo.
And I'm Anton Enos. Also tonight, hundreds injured in a tangled mess of cars and trucks in Britain.
And already a record number have voted in the biggest federal election yet.
I'm pre-voting because I'm going away tomorrow for a wedding interstate, so I'm not going to be near a voting centre.
Well, the campaigning is over and now it's up to the voters as election day looms tomorrow.
The Prime Minister and opposition leader have ended 5 weeks of campaigning, both insisting it's still anyone's to win.
Coming up in World News Australia, St George expected to be spared the worst of the state's ongoing floods.
This is a World News Australia US election special.
Good morning and welcome to our broadcast of the US vice presidential debate. I'm Janice Peterson. With me is David Smith, lecturer in American politics at the US Studies Centre at the University of Sydney. Shortly, we'll take you live to Danville, Kentucky, where Vice President Joe Biden and Republican contender Paul Ryan are facing off.
This is a World News Australia US election special.
Good afternoon and welcome to our special broadcast of the US presidential election. I'm Anton Enos.
Good evening and welcome to a special election edition of World News Australia. I'm Kathy Novak. When Kevin Rudd stormed into office in 2007, the outgoing health minister, one Tony Abbott, declared he was qualified to lead the Liberal Party because of his good people skills.
Touring the drought zone, Tony Abbott promises aid for struggling farmers.
It's really analogous to a natural disaster.
Failure in Geneva, talks on Syria and in impasse.
I'm very, very sorry and I apologize to the Syrian people.
And battered Britain cleans up after the latest Atlantic gale.
This is SBS World News with Lee Lin Chin.
The federal government has promised an assistance package for drought-hit farmers, having recently rejected support for Holden and SPC at Mona. Prime Minister Tony Abbott says
Bernie Sanders and Ted Cruz keep the race for the White House alive.
So let me just say, Hillary, get ready. Here we come.
The Panama Papers claim their first scalp. Iceland's Prime Minister falls on his sword.
And wishy-washy politics. The Turnbull team slammed by its backbench.
This is SBS World News with Anton Enos and Janice Peterson.
Good evening. US presidential hopeful Donald Trump has been dealt a severe blow by Republican rival Ted Cruz.
Good evening, I'm Michael Tomalaris. The top stories. A dream of peace unfulfilled. Israel farewells Shimon Peres. Homes under threat as raging floodwaters rise after 2 days of intense rain.
Pretty damn looking at this water coming back again after 2 weeks.
And the Rosetta probe's last flight, a 12-year space mission, ends in destruction.
This is a trailblazer, and the results have been so incredible.
World leaders have gathered in Jerusalem to farewell former Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Peres. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called him a great man of the world.
Coming up in SBS World News, Lagda Brahimi apologises as talks on Syria end in impasse.
Good evening and welcome to Vote 2016, the SBS World News election special. I'm Janice Peterson, and after 8 weeks of campaigning, 8 weeks of crisscrossing the country and delivering the same key messages in different electorates, mass protests in the Middle East as France's president warns Israel's Prime Minister of a danger to peace. Australia-linked Nobel Peace Prize winners warn the world is just a tantrum away from nuclear disaster. And more pressure mounts on Senator Sam Dastyari to resign over China links.
This is SBS World News with Janice Peterson.
Israel's Prime Minister says Palestinians must get to grips with the reality that Jerusalem is Israel's capital in order to move towards peace. While French President Emmanuel Macron has warned US President Donald Trump's recognition decision.
Russian President Vladimir Putin announces a partial withdrawal of Russian troops from Syria. Israel's Prime Minister urges European leaders to follow President Trump's stance on Jerusalem. And more pressure mounts on Senator Sam Dastyari to resign over China links.
This is SBS World News with Ricardo Gonçalves.
We start with breaking news, and Russian President Vladimir Putin is ordering a partial withdrawal of his country's troops from Syria.
Departing at dawn, the backlash over US President Donald Trump's surprise US troop pullout from Syria is a Turkish offensive imminent. More protests, more disruption, more arrests. Demands for the declaration of a climate emergency spread around the globe. The Endeavour arrives at sunrise. Why a commemoration of James Cook's arrival in New Zealand 250 years ago is raising memories of past wrongs. And bearing the scars of war. A Vietnam veteran's experiences in residential aged care.
This is SBS World News with Darren Mara.
Good evening. US President Donald Trump is facing a geopolitical firestorm, threatening to obliterate Turkey's economy if it goes too far in an impending assault on northern Syria.
Joe Biden's presidential term begins. With the inauguration out of the way, the new leader of the United States gets to work repairing the rift separating the country.
We must end this uncivil war.
Australia's COVID plan, its vaccine rollout, how doctors, nurses and pharmacists are preparing to protect the country from the virus. The Australia Day debate, Scott Morrison and Cricket Australia clash over appropriate reference to the day. And at least 4 people killed in Madrid after an explosion rips through a building.
This is SBS World News with Janice Peterson.
Good evening. US President Joe Biden has begun his White House administration with a blizzard of executive orders in a bid to undo his predecessor's legacy. Donald Trump snubbed the inauguration, a sharp break with tradition.
Good evening. Making news, Israel's Prime Minister says he expects...
In the news, it's reported a Thai political party will comply with the...
Flood emergencies unfolding in 3 states. Thousands evacuated as waters continue to rise. Trapped residents rescued as homes are inundated in Melbourne. Russia urges residents to evacuate from the occupied region of Kherson as Ukrainian forces continue their advance. Former US President Donald Trump ordered to give evidence by the committee investigating the January 6 Capitol riots. So, will he oblige, and what happens if he refuses? And mandatory isolation no longer required, the end of one of the last remaining COVID-19 restrictions, but not everyone has welcomed the change.
This is SBS World News with Ricardo Gonçalves.
Good evening. There are flood alerts across 3 states tonight, with evacuation orders in New South Wales and Victoria, and concerns remain for communities in Tasmania. Tonight, Israel ramps up its strikes on Gaza, while Hamas vows to fight on. Little signs the killing of Yahya Sinwar will reignite ceasefire talks. Prisoners of war reunited with their families in a mass exchange between Russia and Ukraine. The bodies of a mother and her 2 children pulled from a waterway in Sydney's southwest, and healing from a painful past. Survivors of the Kinchela Boys' Home gather to mark 100 years since its opening. I'm Ricardo Gonçalves. This is SBS World News. Good evening. Hamas has confirmed the death of its leader, 61-year-old Yahya Sinwar, after Israel yesterday claimed to have killed him in Gaza.
Tonight, Iran's unequivocal message that strikes on its energy infrastructure will be met in kind. Also, the world's energy watchdog chief is in Australia, but his mind remains on the global oil shock.
The situation is very severe.
Despair across Cuba, where the lights have gone out again. And ex-tropical cyclone Narelle turns roads into rivers in a night of wild weather. I'm Janice Peterson. This is SBS World News. Good evening. The Iranian Red Crescent Society says its emergency teams are responding to an airstrike in a residential area in the northwest city of Urmia, close to the borders of Turkey and Iraq. Good evening. Iran has issued significant new demands on the United States over the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Among its new claims is for the US to, quote, correct its behaviour, permanently end the war and cease the naval blockade on Iran. The announcement came after Iran and Oman signalled they were close to a separate deal for a temporary route to manage passage through the key waterway. But even with that deal, Iran insists without the US yielding to its new demands, the strait will not be fully reopened.